At 24, I was an addict, sleeping on a sofa in a 30 square meter apartment with a Rottweiler and a dealer. At 30, I was standing at 6,000 meters on a mountain in Ecuador. And this is the story of how I spent most of a decade ruining my life, at least by society's and so-called gurus' standards. This isn't a video to highlight my story for the sake of showing people my story, well, for any reason. I'm just simply giving it to the public consciousness in hopes of reaching people that may feel trapped or stuck, or indeed how I felt in my 20s. I guess you could say this is... But also, just a disclaimer, this video will discuss drugs, alcohol, not as a glorification of these things, but to highlight their role in my life for context. Taking drugs is incredibly dangerous and irresponsible and can and does ruin your life. And actually, this is not a redemption story either. I did not get rich or find purpose in the way that people expected. I just kept on moving. And somehow that saved me. But to say that I had a life to ruin in my 20s was a bit disingenuous. My life was ruined long before that. Turns out, with the benefit of hindsight, I had undiagnosed and untreated inattentive ADHD, which basically meant that I was extraordinarily good at doing the bare minimum to get through everything. In fact, my entire school life, I received exactly 1 A, and that was a public speech I did for English about sperm whales that I memorized from a documentary the day before. But also, in school, I was a bit different. Obviously, I'm the kind of guy that does a presentation on sperm whales.
What the fuck, amigo?
But also, I went to a comprehensive secondary school with a semi-posh English accent. So bullying was always a part of my life. And unfortunately, it wasn't just at school, it also did happen at home as well. I was repeatedly told I was worthless, terrible, a waste of space, and realistically all manner of things. At the beginning, though, I did fight it. I was angry and I actually nearly got expelled from school for fighting all the time. But as time went on, I started to withdraw inwards and isolated myself more and more. I went from the kid who literally never shut up to the kid who never said a word in the space of a couple of years. But anyway, that's just a little bit of context as why I didn't exactly have a life to ruin. And when I say a life to ruin, I'm explicitly talking about this set upon goal that we have as society. I didn't really do any of that, which is ironic because as a kid I had one dream, and that was to become a zoology professor. And in the end I ended up studying computer science at university because that's what people told me I should do. In fact, going into A-levels, I really had the choice between IT or media studies. At my dad's request, I decided to do IT, and how ironic that has been in hindsight. But with that started 6 years of IT, with 4 years of that being at university. But it also started 6 years of alcohol and drugs. Because, to be honest with you, I'm a pretty shit person. So my father would send me, he would send me about £20 a week just to help me out. It was, just a little gesture to give me a little boost at university. So that way I would, have to find a job and have an actual income. I did not do that. Instead, I just exclusively survived on the £20 a week and my student loans, using my student loan to pay for rent and whatever else, and then just the £20 a week was basically what I lived on. No, I never bought any textbooks. I did, however, have a small job in a kitchen that I did when I came home each semester that I used to also help supplement my university lifestyle and also my lifestyle at home. And at this time I was skating a lot. In fact, I skated as much as I could between 17 and 24. But honestly, I would spend £5 a week on food, £3 to £5 a week on tobacco, and the rest would be on alcohol and whatever drugs I could get my hands on. So that normally meant just the most grottiest white cider you could possibly imagine, while also being friends with and hanging out a lot with drug dealers. Actually, one of my good friends to this day was a drug dealer at university, but luckily they got clean. Actually, he completely turned his life around. I was very shocked. I really thought we were going to be degenerates until the day we died together. And also, I had to resit my first year. And I remember saying at that point, I didn't want to do this. I wanted to quit and do something else. But everyone in my family advised against it, saying I would be throwing away this opportunity for nothing, that I didn't know what I was doing. But what I did know was that I hated it. I hated programming. I hated databases. I hated all of it. And I lived for the party, so I stayed. And to be honest, the second year in university was probably one of the best and worst experiences of my life. On one hand, I had amazing experiences. I went to some incredible raves and met some cool people and did some wild things. But I also discovered LSD and League of Legends. Yeah. That League. Rather ironically though, League actually did stop me from going out all the time, and I did almost like a full 180. Rather than go out and party every week, I would just go to my friends and we would take LSD and play Mario Kart, FIFA or League. And then I would go home and play more League. But in that year, as time went on, I could feel my mind slipping. I would go to these illegal raves, I would take MDMA, I would take LSD, I would smoke, well, all manner of weed, and then to top it all off, I'd have laughing gas as much as I could. And I suffered an incredible amount of disassociation during this time. But either way, this is all largely self-inflicted, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit now until after university, where I had met a girl and was round hers, and was living with her and her parents while she was at university. Yes, it was weird. It was a weird dynamic. I was living with her family while she was at university. But at this point, I was 22, 23. I wasn't actually drinking that much, all things considered. I was still smoking, but I was lost. I had just graduated, but my attendance was around about 5%. Like, I had no references, and my grade was about as close to failing as you can get without failing. So that year after university, I applied for, well, innumerable jobs. I had a ton of interviews and got none of them. But that's because at that point I was pretty terrible interviewing, to be honest with you. I always said the wrong thing at the wrong times. Honestly, to this day, I still look back and feel a small amount of shame about how I conducted myself at that point in time. The relationship wasn't great either. There was a lot of jealousy, a lot of insecurities. You know, I was young, she was young. It was a recipe for disaster. And after having failed like the umpteenth interview, I decided, well, it was time for something a little bit more drastic. And my girlfriend at the time's mum said I should join the RAF. And honestly, at that point in my life, I was kind of all for it. So we spent some time getting me physically ready. I did my application, had my first meeting booked, and I was ready to go. Life had other plans. And one day I was doing the dishes and I was listening to the radio. This was just literally a few days from going to the RAF meeting, where I heard, and yes, I know, someone listening to the radio, crazy, but I heard a broadcast from Michelle Rodriguez talking about her experiences in South America and taking ayahuasca after Paul Walker's death. And for some reason, well, I guess it's not really some reason given, well, you know, my past and my proclivities, but I decided that this was something that I needed to do with my life. And if I went to the RAF, then I wouldn't be able to do it for a long time, if ever. And this feeling that I had, it was strong. And I know that there are people out there that would say that maybe my desire to join the RAF was probably pretty weak. And yes, you were 100% correct. And you'll probably sit there and say, wow, this guy's such a drug addict that he was going to go to South America to take more drugs. Yes, you are correct. But this desire to experience this thing is honestly one of the strongest things I've ever felt in my life. It was one of the few times in my life where I made a completely active decision by myself. Normally, I'm what's known as a passive or reactive individual. I very rarely make decisions or push for things that I want, and this time it was very different. And this decision, rather unsurprisingly, set up a cascade of events, caused a lot more problems than the situation I was in, until one day my mother said to me, look, George, there's a lot of problems between you and her, and if we have to make a decision, we will always choose her, no ifs or buts. Well, I mean, completely fair enough. And at this point in time, I was working in a factory moving bricks. And I mean, literally, it was a brick cutting factory where my job was to stack bricks on top of a pallet for 10 hours a day. It was brutal work, but at least I had a job. So I decided to leave, and we broke up. I tried to talk to my parents to let me back home. They said no. Luckily though, one of my friends was living in an apartment and let me sleep on his sofa, which actually ended up me leaving the brick job because it was an hour train journey with then a 30-minute bicycle ride away, and I just didn't think that was very sustainable. And I had a little bit of money to try and survive to a point a little bit in the future. So I did know that at this point I'd be reintroducing smoking weed when I was there. That was a given. To make ends meet, my friend had to deal on the side to survive. But not too long after I arrived, things changed. All of a sudden, cocaine was everywhere, and I mean everywhere, every day. And what little money I had went towards that. And my other friend had a problem with his dog, and then the dog came to live with us. So it was me, my friend, his girlfriend, and a Rottweiler, like a Rottweiler Mastiff. This thing had a head the size of a fucking basketball in a tiny, tiny apartment that was barely even like 2 rooms. But I did end up getting another job in a factory making medical supplies, which it kept me alive. And I would take home like maybe £250 a week. 60 would go to rent, 20 or 30 would go to food, and the rest, well, you should know the deal by now. You know exactly where that went. And that was my life for months. I would go to work all day, then I would go skate, and then I would go home and have cocaine or smoke weed. Or I would skate on my days off and then take cocaine and smoke even more weed. Our lives revolved around these things until one day we actually went out. We met a guy who we hadn't seen for a while. He'd just come back from Australia. He then regaled us with his tale. I was reasonably enthralled by it because, well, my life was awful, simply put. I was wasting away, and I saw 2 alternatives here. Either I could stay, become even more addicted to cocaine, maybe get a shitty room in a house nearby and waste away, or I could leave. And at least if I left, I could be one step closer to my goal to go to South America. And that night, could have been the drugs, could have been many things, but me and my friend, we started talking about it. He seemed enthusiastic too. Well, he actually had like a really rough life. So I really wanted to get him out as well. I wanted us to escape. Like, his life was brutal. Actually, a lot of my friends' lives back then were pretty brutal. So I really wanted both of us to get away from this. I just wanted him out. He was like my little brother. So I took out a loan of a couple $1,000s. Well, a couple £1,000. I gave my friend money to get his passport, and that was a mistake. He spent it on cocaine. For a month, I asked him to just buy a passport, but he kept deflecting, he kept deferring. I guess in hindsight, it was probably like a silly dream to him. His life was there. He loved his life. He loved his girlfriend. He loved his apartment. I did not. And it all came to a head one night. He came home. He was completely smashed. I was trying to get to sleep because I had work in the morning. He just started blasting music at 2 a.m. I asked him to stop. He said no. He said to me, it's my house. He could do whatever he wants, and that I should be grateful that he lets me stay there. And because of that, he should be able to do whatever he wants. And that was kind of the moment I knew I need to leave. I started my visa process the next morning and got myself ready. I didn't say goodbye. There was no fanfare. There was no heartfelt see you again. There was nothing like that. I just simply left one morning, and I guess when he came back, I was gone. I still regret how I left to this day. I think about it a lot because I've heard what's happened to him over the years, and I feel bad about that situation, but I needed to save myself. But then the next thing I knew, I was in Australia, and Australia can only be described as a whirlwind. I arrived in Cairns, which is in the north, and I had about 1,500 Australian dollars in my account. It's about £800 at the time. It's not much in the grand scheme of things, but it was 100% enough to buy boxes of goon and get blackout drunk every single night. For context, goon is cheap Australian wine that comes in 5-litre boxes and gives you the nastiest hangovers that you will ever experience in your life. Looking back, there was probably a lot of pain that I was feeling. I'd just been rejected by my family, I'd lost my girlfriend, and having to abandon my friend. I was hurting. I was not happy. But I knew it was the best decision I could have made, at least for myself at the time. But with this loose anonymity, I could sort of reinvent myself. I dabbled in a few different personalities. It sounds weird to say that, but people who've traveled might understand what I'm getting at. I'd spent most of my life being very quiet and very reserved because of, well, that was just how I stayed safe from bullies and stuff. Like, I just keep myself back. I tried to be a wallflower. So when I went traveling, I started trying to be loud. I started trying to be talkative. I started trying to talk to girls and be more confident. But that was a bit just course correction, and all of this was just to try and forget my life back at home. But no matter how much chemical brain damage I inflicted on myself, I never could forget, and I still haven't. But once that money ran out, I had to go to work. So in Australia, you can do this thing called a working holiday visa, which basically allows you to work there for a couple years, and you start with 1 year, or at least you did at that time. The rules have changed since then, and you could work on farms to extend it, so you'd go on to a second year, and so on and so forth. So after a month of drinking, I thought I would go and work on some farms, orchards to be exact. But to begin with, there was bananas and mangoes, which is just awful work. And then I got avocados in the end, which is pretty good. I did that for about 4 or 5 months, and it was only like 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Yeah, you had to run up a ladder with a 20-kilo bag of avocados, but it was better than mangoes, which was 12 hours a day with no days off, walking next to a machine, picking mangoes. I was tough. But Australia is where my gambling addiction started, because in the working hostel that I was staying at for these orchards, there was nothing really to do at night except for play ping pong, or play poker. So obviously, more communal, we played more poker. And it got more and more as the months went on. In that time, though, I discovered online poker as well. And I had the misfortune of making a deep run in a tournament, which set me up for failure because I thought I was a good poker player. Spoiler alert, I was not a good poker player. Either way, I met more girls, drank more beer, and this period of my life was actually kind of cool, honestly. The hostel I was working at was just working people, so it never really changed, and the people were generally pretty nice, except for there is that old adage, you don't shit where you eat. Unfortunately, I did not learn this lesson. No, wait, I did learn this lesson, and the situation between me and this girl I met at the hostel fell apart pretty horribly, which made things uncomfortable, especially when she started fucking the guy in my room, which was just a whole... yeah, that was just weird. He was a nice guy though, I had nothing against him. Girl was a dick though. After that, I ended up getting into contact with my ex. Yes, I know what you're thinking, but luckily I ran out of my data on my phone and she freaked out about it. So I said maybe it wasn't a good idea to continue, which she then threatened the worst. And honestly, I took that extremely offensively, told her how bad it was to threaten something like that, told her mother what she did, and then blocked everyone. But yeah, during that time, 7 months went by and I had to leave. This is when I made possibly the single biggest and worst decision of my life. I actually did not save any money at this time. In fact, I spent the vast majority of it on poker. I had maybe $500 at a push and decided to use that money to go to fucking Sydney. Arriving in Sydney with essentially nothing. I managed to put myself up in a hostel that was extraordinarily cheap for good reason. It was pretty bad. And I found 2 jobs. One was working in a restaurant in a busy part of Sydney. It was not a high end, but it was a nice bar. The other was doing door-to-door sales with a contract company for Greenpeace on a road trip down the south of Australia. Yes, that Greenpeace. And I'm pretty sure you can tell what I did, because I'm an idiot. I went with Greenpeace. It was a fucking mistake. Everything about it was predatory, you know? I didn't even sign a contract until we were like on the next city over, the next town over. And the contract was bad. The contract was real bad. And I said to them, look, if I had seen this contract when I was in Sydney, I would not have signed. Because it was just how many ways they could extort money out of you. And it wasn't pleasant. So this is not to say that I dislike Greenpeace, but it was the contractor company who hired me that was the problem. And this was also winter in Australia. Yes, Australia in the south actually does get winter, so we would be frequently walking in cold weather all day, every day. And after finding out the contract thing, I just didn't want to do it. So instead, I would just walk around the towns, see some things, and they would give me free accommodation. Like a free road trip. The only thing I had to do was pay for food, which, to be honest with you, at this point was largely just rum and noodles and eggs. But it got to a point that I was done with it, so I gave up. I got on a train to Melbourne. There was a friend that I knew from the farming that was there. I had just enough money to pay for a few nights there, and he took me out, and we met some Australians to go rooftoping, which basically means you break into hotels and buildings and try and get as high as possible. We ended up getting on a hot tub. I ended up skinny dipping in a hot tub in a hotel. But they were really nice people. Like, seriously incredible people. I explained the situation to them that I was in, and so one of them gave me a beat up old laptop so I could write a CV, and the rest actually put me up for a few nights in their houses and stuff. There was also another girl who took pity on me, who put me up for a few nights in a hostel as well, and I feel bad about that one because she was romantically engaged in like she wanted to have something romantic, right? And I didn't really have the headspace for that, and so she didn't take it too kindly when I left. Oh my god. And there was also another thing. I put a Gumtree ad and this guy responded. He said to me, "Hey, saw your ad, I've got some massage work for you." And I was like, "What do you mean massage work?" And he says, "Oh, basically I practice massaging you and I'll pay you $60 an hour." I was like, "That's weird." And so I was like, okay, well, having a massage is fine, right? But then he wanted to meet me in like a really, really sketchy place. And then he said to me, "It's okay if you come." I was like, "Excuse me? What?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll give you a hand job instead." I was like, whoa, no, absolutely not. Yeah, needless to say that, yeah. But with the CV, I did actually manage to find a job. It was in the middle of New South Wales building fences, which wasn't great. But it was actually kind of fine, right? I had about $20 in my pocket at this point, and I had a choice between cigarettes or food. I chose food. But if anyone ever wants to know the secret about how you quit smoking, just go to the middle of bumfuck nowhere with no cigarettes and no one who smokes cigarettes around you for a couple of weeks. Does a pretty good job of getting the ball rolling. But I must have lasted in this place for maybe 2 weeks. And, well, I left because I broke the machine that bashed the fence post downs. They weren't happy. Yeah. But I had a fresh 1,000 Australian dollars in my bank account. So I went on my next adventure, where another friend of mine had let me know that mango season was about to start in Darwin. Now, you remember how I said mango was shit because you work 12 hours a day with no days off? Well, at this point in time, it was amazing because 12 hours a day with no days off meant I would just make money. So I got on a flight and went straight up to Darwin. Turns out, though, it was not just starting. There was, in fact, several weeks until it would start. And I had actually arranged a job at a farm, but he said, yeah, it wouldn't be for a few weeks. And I arrived in the beginning of September, and it didn't actually start until October. So yeah, big problem. I only had like $600. And the other bigger problem is accommodation in Darwin is not cheap. And that $600 I had evaporated instantly. And I also had to pay for my friend to be able to stay on the hostel too, because he was broke as I was. So we ended up hitchhiking down to a town called Humpty Doo, walked miles in the sun to try and find a farm that was hopefully starting a bit sooner, but we didn't find one. So we ended up camping on beaches for a few nights to try and save a little bit of money. But by the end of it, we gave up and were destroyed by sandflies. So in the end, I swallowed my pride and asked my father for a little bit of money, something I just did not want to do. And I ended up doing this a couple times in this period because, well, I needed to survive a few weeks. But I must have asked a little bit too much because he said, "Hey, if you ask any more, I want you to pay it back." And that was something I was not able to do at the time. But with his help, I did survive for the next few weeks. And my friend and I ended up getting to the mango farm. And it was pretty good. Farm work in Australia is really shit, but it's fun because it's like a big community vibe. It's just like every night you just sit around, play cards, chat, guitar, whatever. But the work was super shit. It was like 40 degrees Celsius, which is like 110 degrees in America. And you were working on a cherry picker with a hydro ladder. 12 hours a day, no days off, unless it rained. And it lasted about 3 and a bit weeks. And it did not rain until the last day. That last day we had like this little party to celebrate the end. And I saw, it just started pissing it down with rain. And I saw there was a little mango still in the tree. So I was like, oh, that's cool. And I was really drunk. So I jumped up trying to grab this mango. Like I'm trying to jump. And then all of a sudden all of my friends, they came out to dance in the rain, and like the water was deep. The water was like up to your shins. And so I jumped up trying to grab this mango, and all of a sudden just this unbelievably loud thunder crack. And I mean, like, I've never seen lightning that close. I just feel all of this electricity just like jolt up my body. And I look over and all of my friends are on the floor. Yeah, that was stupid. Yeah, don't do that, kids. But at that time, I'd learned a thing called fly-in, fly-out work, which basically meant that you stayed in one place and then they would fly you in and fly you out of a mine or some other mining-adjacent work thing for about 2 weeks at a time. You work 10 hours a day for 2 weeks and then you have a week off. I applied. I got a job as a housekeeper / kitchen worker, thanks to my experiences from my summer jobs in the kitchen. And also, once my job was up at the farm, I had a few thousand Australian dollars in my account. And then I went to do this new fly-in, fly-out work, which was, again, based in Darwin. And it was awesome. I made so much money doing this, more money than I'd ever seen in my life. I would go away, I would not spend a single penny, and then I would come back with like $3,000 or $4,000. It was awesome. And then also in Darwin, people were incredible. Like the people that I met there were amazing. We went to bush stuffs, which are like bush raves, just parties in the jungle. You know, we went to like abandoned warehouses and stuff. And the places there in Darwin, if you find them there, they do like the best parties. Well, historically they did. I don't know about anymore. This is like 10 years ago now, you know? So I don't know. But I assume they're still going. I still get notifications. But after some months of doing that, I decided that I wanted to be an actual backpacker and do backpacker things. So I ended up doing a trip down the East Coast and a little bit of a trip down the South Coast as well. And I spent some time in Brisbane, just milling about, to be honest. And then eventually I did end up going straight back to Darwin because, well, the money was good and I did not want to experience financial insecurity ever again in my life. I stayed there in Darwin pretty much that entire year. I would go to parties, and drink more, have a good time. Luckily for me, Australia at this time had made online gambling illegal. So at this point, I couldn't really do it. So all of my money was spent on Johnny Walker whiskey instead. And honestly, there are so many stories from this period of my life, but I'm not going to cover them. But if anyone ever sees it, money, sex, glory. But once Australia came to an end, the next logical step was to go to New Zealand, because it had another working holiday scheme. And at this point, I had a decent amount of money stashed away. And I was ready to go for another year or two of good vibes before I probably had to go back to the UK. So I got a job in a kitchen in Auckland, where I stayed for a couple months. I stayed with some friends that I had known from the mango farm. It was awesome. But after a while, everyone decided they wanted to do something else. I ended up in a town called Queenstown, again in a kitchen for a famous burger restaurant there, which was, that was something. Yeah, I lived in Queenstown for about a year, and that's when the gambling started again, and where I met my ex-girlfriend, who I ended up being with for 5 years. We moved after a little bit of getting to know each other, we moved into a house share together. It's kind of what you did when you're backpacking. If you met people, you'd end up living with them pretty quickly. But also at this point is when I became sober. I drank less than once a month at most. It was zero drugs involved. This is also where I stopped socially smoking too, mainly because, I wasn't drinking. And then the thing that changed everything happened at the end of that year. COVID. Actually, I just gotten my sponsorship visa granted for the kitchen I was working in on the day that we went into lockdown. And almost immediately afterwards, I was made redundant because of that, which turned out to be terrible because I literally lost my working holiday visa, and all of them got extended. So I had nothing. I just lost all my visa. I just paid thousands to get this visa. And now I had no subsidy. I had no pay. And I was spending insane Queenstown prices for rent. So what little I had saved up was completely eviscerated. I did actually get on food stamps and survived mostly because of them. But then my ex and I, we had to come to a decision. She was from China, so I could not go there. And there was something about England as well at the time, I can't remember. So our only options were to break up or stay in New Zealand together and try and outlast COVID. So we chose to try, and I moved onto a visitor visa, and we ended up bouncing around doing hostel volunteer work in the North Island, which we travelled up for, and that just basically meant that all we needed was money for food. And then she found a job working in a Chinese restaurant that gave us food as well. So actually at that point we didn't spend any money, and she was also making a wage. and I was working for her to get free accommodation. Thankfully, though, New Zealand introduced this new visa, which basically let me work on orchards and live there for a little while longer, and also make money, which came in 6 months increments. But this visa ended up lasting like almost 2 or 3 years. It would always update every 6 months. Sometimes we'd have to pay more, but yeah, largely it was like almost 2 or 3 years of that. But the relationship actually got pretty bad towards the end. A lot of things happened, and she ended up going back to China. And my part in that was pretty terrible. I tried to break up a few times, but she kept on convincing me to stay, and that lasted about a year. So in the end, yeah, it was pretty bad. Which then left me with 6 months where I was alone again in New Zealand. I moved to a new town, got another job on a different orchard, and then the gambling got really bad. Oh my god. Because once again I had a streak of good fortune. I had just managed to win $4,000. And at this point I had almost 25,000 New Zealand dollars saved. But then I lost 15,000 in a month. So I went all the way down to $10,000 from 25, which was crazy. Luckily I had the restraint to not go any deeper, because I knew that once this 6 months was over, the moment that I'd waited so many years for was going to happen, and that was to go to South America. I just want to address this now because it's really easy to look back at my life and say that everything worked out for me because I have my YouTube channel. That's not at all the case. I am incredibly blessed by all of the things that have happened to me. Like, I am so grateful for everything. Like, I know that I'm not sitting there saying that my story is the hardest thing that anyone's ever been through. It's far from it. But there was enough difficulties that I experienced that I understood difficulty, and I understood what it meant to, live with insecurity and do all these things. It was just enough that I was like, oh, that's pretty bad. I don't like that. But it was not so much that it overwhelmed me and created like a really bitter or resentful mindset. So for me is such a beautiful thing that I can look back and be like, thank you. And no, I'm not just saying that because now I have a YouTube channel and now I have like this whole thing. Even before all of this, don't get me wrong, the YouTube channel is cool and I love it, but I still had this level of satisfaction irrespective. And that is because I made this one simple calculation during my travel, and that was, I'm using my retirement now. I knew that I would never do anything with my life. I fully succumbed to that belief. I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm never going to be successful. I'm never going to have money. So I'm just going to enjoy all of my life now while I can, and hope to God it gets better in the future. And I just knew that I was going to be retiring when I'm 70, 80, or even just retiring when I'm dead. That was the choice that I made, because that's the choice that you have to make in these things sometimes. I fully resigned myself to the belief that I would spend the rest of my life working in an Amazon warehouse or something similar. But that was okay, so long as I lived. And I was okay with that. And that last 6 months in New Zealand was seriously amazing. I met more amazing people. Some I'm still in contact with, which is remarkable because, honestly, after so many years of traveling, I've lost contact with many people. You kind of just accept the inevitable goodbye, And there's that thing called like the backpacker dance, which is, the script when you meet people was like, hi, what's your name? Where are you from? What are you doing here? Blah, 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 blah. I got so fucking bored of that shit after so many years, so I just stopped doing it. A lot of people thought I was an asshole because I would just sit there and say to them, who fucking cares about names? You're not going to remember me tomorrow or in a week or in a month. Let's just go out and have some fun. But yeah, New Zealand gave me 5 pretty amazing years. I learned a lot about myself, a lot about life and responsibility, gambling. And, when I left for Australia, I was 24 years old. I was a drug addict. When I left New Zealand, I was 30 years old and just an idiot. I changed a lot, and a lot of it was for the better. Some of it was a bit for the worse. I was quieter. I was a bit quieter when I left New Zealand. I became more reserved over time, but I just think that's who I am. But on my way to America, I stopped over in the US to see my father. He had visited me like in Cannes a few years before, but this was like the first time I'd seen him in very, very long time. And my dad, he's a special kind of guy, and for the longest time I always thought he was different and different from me. I always thought that his idea was success and career and build a life. So when I told him that I felt I'd let him down by not building a career or being successful, he just looked at me and said, "But you were successful. You traveled all these years and you managed to make it work. You did things that people don't have the courage to do and carved out, in his words, a little niche for yourself." And he said, as long as I was happy. And yeah, I guess when I look at it like that, he was right. But honestly, it was never courage that made me do what I did. It was desperation. I just had to escape. When you're trying to escape, that you don't need courage. For me, I never had the courage to face real life, to do things that I needed to do to live. Don't get me wrong, like I had an unbelievable life, did awesome things, but I traded all of that life experience for stability. You know, I feel like I've lived like 1,000 lives and seen so many things, except for the life that society deems to be normal. But that's okay. I'm doing that now. But the desperation saved me. I had to take that road and I had to escape, and I had to make moves to just try anything different and just make it work for me, and it worked. But what came next, I did not expect, despite 10 years of preparation. I took ayahuasca. Yeah, 10 years of waiting, it happened. And suffice to say, it was legitimately the most life-changing experience of my life. I finally understood what I'm built to do. I understand who I am now. And I've taken ayahuasca a few times now, and to say that it is a drug is a bit wrong. Technically here it's classified as a sacred ritual plant and is ceremonial. And, you know, taking ayahuasca is a deeply personal and intense decision to make. And I absolutely would not recommend people who see this or other crap online and think, hey, that's going to fix all my problems, let's go do it. It's not like that. Like, at best, you're going to have an awful experience and wonder, why did you convince yourself to do that? And at worst, it's going to really fuck you up. It's not like taking a tab of LSD and seeing some patterns or breathing walls or something, because it's not something you go to do recreationally. It's an experience, and every time you do it, it's work, it's hard work, it's painful. But once you get past that, it's kind of beautiful. No, it is very beautiful. But either way, my experiences with ayahuasca are stories for probably another day. But I did meet people there who changed a lot about the way that I think about myself and how I think about the world. Because to this point, I was an aimless wanderer. I was deep in the clutches of nihilism. I truly believed that nothing mattered, that I cared about nothing. But I learned that this was mostly just a shield to protect myself from finding my own purpose, to find my path, to choose my path, or really love life in any way. Deep down, I am a purpose-driven person. I need a reason, I need a why, but I was always waiting for the why to be given to me, or someone else to take a risk on me or give me a why. But I learned that it was always for me to decide for myself, not anyone else. I learned that you don't need meaning to have purpose. A hammer has purpose, but it doesn't have a significance to it, to anything but itself, and the nail that is hammering. And I am a hammer. I am just a simple hammer. But it really brought down my barriers, and I had spent so much time walling myself up and hiding parts of myself from everyone and everything. I never wanted anyone to see any parts of myself, and to this day I still do that. I do find it very hard to be vulnerable. I find it hard to do a lot of things, actually. So when I met my current partner in Ecuador and she asked me to go climbing Chimborazo, I said yes. I dragged my friend with us, who a few of you will know his music because I've used his songs many times in the past. We didn't climb it though. We did get to 6,000 meters and subsequently gave up. Honestly, to be honest with you, I probably could have done it, but my friend had, well, let's just say intestinal difficulties and was constantly farting in my nose and having to go off the side of the trail every like 20 minutes, I guess. And you know, I'd never really been above 3,000 meters, so for me, that was pretty good effort. And so we had the conversation. We traveled for a bit. We went to Ecuador, Colombia, and then we were like, oh, what do we do now? And she said, let's go to Brazil. And we came to Brazil in the coolest way possible. We took a boat from Tabatinga to Manaus, and honestly, that could be one of the greatest moments of my life. Going to Brazil down the Amazon, that was awesome. And all of this kind of happened when I needed it to, and this was a moment in my life when I was actually truly ready to experience it. And when we arrived in Brazil, I was looking for work and just decided randomly to start a YouTube channel. Now, this is something I would never, ever have considered before, but I did it because why not? If I can do all of these things in my life, if I can push myself through some pretty difficult situations, why couldn't I make it as a content creator? Why not choose to make my life better? I chose to go to South America, I chose to do all these things, chose to come to Brazil, so why not just choose to become a content creator? And here we are today. I chose to take a risk on myself because no one else was going to. And none of this would have been possible if everything didn't happen exactly when it happened. If I didn't have all of those experiences of heartache, frustrations, gamblings, everything, then I probably wouldn't have the mindset that I have now. The mindset of just keep on going, keep pushing, because in life, no matter what you do, it's gonna be fucking boring. I'm sorry, but there was so many times when I was traveling, it was boring. Life is boring, it's difficult, it's horrible. And I try to think in years. If I can't think in years, I think in months. If I can't think in months, I think in weeks. If I can't think in weeks, I think in days. I just keep on going until I find whatever it takes to keep on moving. You just keep on moving. Well, sounds pretty cringe, but an open heart and an open mind, because if you do, sometimes life throws you a bone and can take you places you never dreamed possible. But it's only if you let it. You need to let life happen. You need to take risks. Life without risk, life without movement, life without experience isn't really a life. It's just existing. Of course, you shouldn't do these things with an expectation for anything. You should never do anything with any expectation. You should just do it, hope for the best, and then just accept if it goes wrong. Everything you ever do is a trade, and it's always a risk. It could always go wrong, but yeah. I did trade my potential future for life experience probably a little bit too much. I wouldn't recommend exactly following my path. And I mean, if I failed, I probably would have been completely fucked, but no more fucked than if I didn't try. And there are a lot of people that would say, hey, use your 20s. You should use that to set up your career, go to old age, do whatever. It's great advice. I say is good advice for a lot of people, but for someone like me, who, let's be honest, still doesn't know what they're doing half the time, I just needed life experience more than I needed stability. But now I just keep on going. And honestly, if a fucked up kid sleeping on a sofa off his face on cocaine can do anything with their life, well, then so can you. And I'm glad I got off that sofa. I'm glad I left. I'm glad I allowed myself to do it, because for whatever reason, I got pretty remarkable at living. I forget my pain. I needed time to breathe so I could green my leaves. Now all the skies are blue.